from the Surf Hermits here, coming at you from COVID isolation in the mini Hermitage. Fortunately, things are going well. We've got some toys in the background there, got good decor, and always the best of company, myself. How exciting. Anyway, we have more Chick Corea's cheap but good advice for playing music in a group. A lot of wisdom here, and if you're sick of it, well, too bad. No one says no to Chick, as you know, if you've ever hung around with Chick, which I haven't, but I'm just guessing that it's probably, that's how it is when you're hanging around with Chick. I hope it is, because that's kind of cool. Anyway, let's get on it. Here on the Pi Records Network, Creative Waves. Hey, let's go back to Chick Corea, that is, and his cheap but good advice for playing music in a group. All right, so we've talked about 4 of these things so far. Kind of talked about playing what you hear. If you don't hear anything, don't play anything. Don't let your limbs wander. Don't improvise on endlessly. Let things conclude when they naturally want to conclude. Okay, now we're going to talk about number 5. Leave space, create space, intentionally create places where you don't play. So that ties in pretty closely to what we talked about in previous weeks. And in a sense, all these things tie together quite closely. There's some very central principles that look out over all of this stuff. So leaving and creating space, it's much like we talked about with the don't improvise endlessly, where we don't want to, we don't want to just go on forever. We want to create breaks, let things breathe, right? So space is important, and we talked about it. Rhythm is application of space, if we think about it, right? We have sounds appearing with different lengths of silence between them. That's what makes a rhythm. So even by just doing a rhythm, let's do a surf beat, right? So that gives us, there's little spaces in there that make that sound like what it sounds like. And yeah, by doing that, we're intentionally creating space, but it's more than that, right? It's knowing when not to play on a larger musical level, knowing when to let things breathe, knowing when to let other people speak, especially playing in a group. We can think of it as a bunch of people playing their parts side by side, and in a way that's kind of what an orchestra does, to horribly oversimplify it and generate as much hate mail as possible from classical musicians. But these are people with sheet music that are playing music beside each other, and it's guided by the conductor, and it all creates something greater than the sum of its parts, in a sense. One of the interesting things about rock music, jazz music, and sort of modern music, in the sense that we've come to understand it, since maybe even since the blues and all of that. We could go into music history if we want, but we don't want. There's this idea of playing together, where what the other person does affects what you play, and what you play affects what the other person does. And these things aren't preset, in a sense. These are things that occur as the group playing is occurring. So something always happens that is not necessarily intentional, but it makes it great, right? It makes it surprising to the players. It makes it pleasurable, hopefully for the listener as well. And it's that kind of synergy that makes things interesting. But for that to be able to happen, we have to be attentive to what the other people are doing. We have to treat it like a conversation, in a sense, where a conversation is not me saying stuff and then waiting for my turn to say more stuff. A conversation is when we feed off each other, where, say I started the conversation, I might say some things, you might respond in a certain way. Your response guides what I might say next, whereas and the same with what I might say starts to change what your response might be. It's why we couldn't write a script and then go up to one of our friends and have that conversation off the script. because very soon we'd be off script, if you try to predict what someone else would say. You have to be open, you have to be unsure in a certain way, where you don't know what the person's going to say, you don't know what's going to happen next, but the pleasure of a good conversation is those little surprises, those things that we can't predict, those things, how it changes our course of thought and speech. And it's exactly the same in music. It's magic when you get together with some people that lead you in directions that you wouldn't have gone by yourself. And that's wonderful, right? It means that we can let go, sort of. We're not having to grab onto everything tight and make it all happen. Making it happen is a good concept, right? But sometimes making it happen means stop trying to make it happen so much. Let it happen. Letting it happen is an important thing too. Sometimes it can't happen unless you let it. You can't make it. You gotta let it. So in terms of creating space, leaving space, that's the conversation part of it. Everyone getting a chance to speak, leaving space so that you can hear what other people are saying, and so that can inform what happens next for you, and vice versa. Important concept, playing in a group. But even while writing music for yourself, it's like, leave those spaces, allow things to ride for a second, allow some of the, other parts to do their work as well. When recording music, often we're doing things in pieces, especially if we're doing it by ourselves. If we're doing it as a band, sometimes we can go in and play live, and that's cool. But sometimes if we're working by ourselves, we have to build each piece into something, right? So everything is kind of a brick, not a wall, but we're building a wall out of bricks. So we want everything to have a chance to speak in that sort of setting, in different ways. Sometimes some things don't speak as loud as others, and that's okay. Some things have their different roles within that arrangement. But allowing that whole thing to be heard rather than just kind of run over by whatever the lead instruments are, that's important, right? And as a lead instrument player, it's a powerful thing to be able to back things off, to leave space for other things to fill those voids, right? To inform you about what's going to come next. Sometimes, we get into that spot. I'm not a great guitar player, so I get stuck in a sense a lot, where I've got some good things and I can't keep it going, So sometimes letting it stop, letting it trail off, letting other things inform me about what comes next instead of having to constantly come up with what's next. Those are the important things about creating and leaving space in music. And for the listener, again, there's an emotional breathing aspect of it where space helps them experience it, what you're giving them. Depends on the type of music. If we're talking like death metal or something, in a way it's not about space, it's about a constant assault, but that in itself is a statement of space. The absence of space is using space as well, right? And other types of music do that in different ways depending on what you're trying to accomplish. Again, there's no rule that can't be broken. There's no rule that doesn't imply, the opposite way of doing things. So again, leave space, intentionally create places where you don't play, right? That's the mirror image of the intentionality that we talked about before, where we place our hands on the instrument and intend what we're going to do. Sometimes we take our hands off the instrument and intend what we're going to do. That's so important in a way. It's almost more important than any techniques that you could learn. Someone that can do these things, even if they're not a great player, are someone that is valued in any group of musicians because they know when to do things and when not to do things. Even if they're not a real technician, doesn't matter. To me, that's what makes someone a musician rather than a technician. Amazing stuff. Let's go to number 6. Make your sound blend. Listen to your sound and adjust it to the rest of the band and the room. So this is a bit related to that in a sense, but it's also about, even if we're not this on and off binary of, space, note, someone's playing, someone's not playing. This is now about making things work together. So we might be playing at the same time as another person, but we want to make sure that we blend with them. So again, it's playing what you hear in another angle of that, right? We're hearing the rest of the band or the music that we're playing to, that we're recording on top of or whatever. And we're taking how we should play, the cues for how we should play from that, how loud we should play, how our tone blends in with what's happening. As a guitar player, there's tones we like. Sometimes those tones don't work always with what else is going on. So we need to be adaptable. We need to be able to make our tone blend, have our tone blend. As a drummer, we always get accused of being the loudest, etc. But we know it's guitar players that are actually the war criminals there. Nonetheless, as a drummer, we have a real responsibility as an acoustic instrument, not usually amplified at all, the original acoustic instrument. As an acoustic instrument, only we have control over our levels. We can't reach over and turn a knob down and turn ourselves down or up. We have control over that, and we have to do that with our bodies, with our minds. And so we need to make it blend. We don't want to be smashing through, other people's stuff. We want to blend in with the band and drive it the way that we should as the drummer. And the space that we're in matters, right? The space matters. It all kind of matters. And so we always have to be outwardly perceptive, not just like, oh my God, how do I sound? It's like, what does everything sound like? How does he sound? How can I make that person sound better? How can I make this room sound good? And sometimes there are places where that's not always possible, but it's our job to kind of make it happen, right? To do what we can to make everything work. So blend with others. There's a lot of directions we could take that in a sense. I mean, we could take it in terms of even our artistic goals as a band. How do we blend with what's going on? Are we going to chase success? Or are we going to do what the audience likes? Or are we going to just do our own thing? Doesn't matter if anyone likes it or not. Those are different aspects of blending with the world as a band, right? So we each find our own equation there, what works best for us. I tend to be I really couldn't care less what people think of it. I like it, so I'm going to do that. Other people, and rightfully so, are like, well, when we play live, the audience dances to these songs and they love this kind of stuff, so this is what we're going to play. And that's an amazing way to do it too, and a great way to do it. And if everyone was like me, no one would like music, because audiences would be like, why would I listen to that, right? So we need both aspects of those things for music to be enjoyable for everybody. Yeah, so that's 5 and 6, and we'll talk about more in subsequent weeks. Thanks for sitting in with Creative Waves on the Pi Records inter-cross-dimensional subgalactic infra-universal YouTube network.